And what does it look like when real power kills a president who thinks wrongly that he has the power?
Ordinarily, a unit of military, I think was called a Special Group Number 113, would have come up from San Antonio, Texas, and would have been deployed all through the streets of Dallas, the important streets of Dallas. That was not done. In fact, the commander was specifically told he wasn't needed.
Secret Service regulations require that any time the president's car slows down below 44 miles per hour, the security must be poured on.
You've all seen the picture of the school book building, you know, where Oswald is supposed to have shot the president. You notice in those pictures there are open windows. If the Secret Service had been there and had done their usual job, none of those windows would have been open. And had anyone opened one of those windows at that time, they would have been on the radio, they would have had a man in that room immediately, and the window would have been closed. You see, that's protection.
Instead, as the president's car slowed to execute a hairpin turn into the killing zone, not only had the support from the Army been canceled, but
no Secret Service agent was in that area.
What are we looking at here? Handles on the back of the president's limo? Why? Duh! Normally, in a motorcade, Secret Service agents would be riding on the back of his car and run along beside him whenever the car slowed down. In Dallas, these agents were ordered to abandon their positions. They didn't agree with it, they didn't like it, but they followed their orders. Normally, there would be 4 motorcycles on each side of the president's limousine. This is what the Dallas police prepared for. However, all of the motorcycle police were removed from escorting the president. 2 were placed on each side of the car containing the Secret Service agents, and the rest were moved to the back of the parade.
If I was president, I'd get elected on Friday, assassinated on Saturday. Look
at the people in these crowds. They are 10 and 12 deep in some places. Just before the last turn in the motorcade, we can see people are still standing 5 feet deep to see the president. But then the limousine turns the corner, drives 100 yards, and what happened? Where are all the people? The killers were nearly able to completely eliminate the witnesses to their crime by excluding them from Dealey Plaza. They controlled the murder scene. They made sure that
no Secret Service agent was in that area,
except for the small army of their people running around with Secret Service credentials.
When I got here, I was stopped by a person in a suit with an overcoat over his arm, thrown over his arm. Also had a gun under his arm. It looked like a little machine gun to me, a small machine gun.
Tell them the truth. Tell them about JFK.
Normally, Kennedy would be accompanied on such a motorcade by his personal physician and his military aide, the person responsible for carrying the portable phone that allowed the president to be in constant communication with the National Security Agency, in case of a sneak attack by the Russians, for example. In an extraordinary move, these 2 men were excluded from Kennedy's limousine. However, they did provide Kennedy with a driver who, film shows, was braking until after the fatal headshot to the president. In this frame, close to 12 shots have been fired. The president and Governor Connolly already have 5 wounds between them. There's a hole in the freaking windshield, and this sucker has his foot on the brake. But watch this. Look at the driver. What is he doing? His training says that he should be speeding away from the scene. His partner is supposed to have jumped into the back seat, thrown the president to the floor, and jumped on top of him to shield him. But instead, they are both completely turned around, watching the president die. Why? What possible explanation is there for this extraordinary behavior? It is not until the driver sees the president receive the fatal shot to the head that he finally turns around and drives off at top speed. Now, you can invent an explanation for this behavior if you choose to. But then you have to invent an explanation for why this man was never questioned by the investigators regarding his most unusual behavior. The most obvious explanation is that this man was part of a conspiracy, that his job was to keep the president in the line of fire until he was dead, Certainly that's the job that he performed.
Radio won't play this. They call it rap music. How can you refuse it?
In the first minutes after the assassination, the true story went out about the fatal shot from the front. But as the hours went by, invisible forces began to black out the truth, take control of the story, and the language that could be used to discuss the assassination. Their words, their version of events, went out steadily and unstoppably, and penetrated deeply into the killer's well-oiled propaganda machine. At 5:10, the afternoon of the murder, the code word slump, the official lie, first appears, this time on the death certificate. Minutes later, while Governor Connally is lying in his hospital bed, he repeats the code word that the killers have decided to use to describe the president as he was shot.
I turned to look in the back seat. The president had slumped. He had said nothing.
Slumped. The dictionary defines slump as to drop, collapse, or fall down. Connally saw the president choking on a bullet in his throat, but he didn't see him slump until after he saw him thrown violently backwards as his brains were blown out. This exact same peculiarly inaccurate choice of words shows up everywhere, not only on the death certificate, but in newspapers and magazines, and 40 years later you can find it in the most popular high school history book in the country. But let's wait 1 minute here to take a second careful look at the man who was chosen by the killers to ride in the car directly in front of the president.
He had said nothing.
Apparently, on the day of the murder, the killers were primarily concerned with overriding the accounts of the numerous witnesses who said that the president's brains were blown out the back of the limousine by a shot from the front. So, the official story on the day of the murder was that there were 3 shots, that the first one hit Kennedy in the back, the second hit Connally, and the third hit the president in the head, and he slumped. And this is the version of events that the governor is supporting here.
He had just turned the corner. We heard a shot. I turned to look in the back seat. The president had slumped. He had said nothing. Almost simultaneously, as I turned, I was hit. And I knew I'd been hit badly.
But later, the Warren Commission looked at the Zapruder film and saw clearly that the first shot had missed, and they came up with the ridiculous single bullet theory. But if Connally and Kennedy were hit by the same bullet, Connally could not have looked in the back seat and seen that the president had been hit, so it was necessary for Connally to change his story, and he did.
Unquestionably, when the first shot was fired, I recognized it as a shot. I thought of nothing else but that it was a rifle shot. I turned to my right. I had time to think. I had time to react. And I turned to my right to look back over my right shoulder to see if I could see anything unusual, and particularly to see if I could catch the president out of the corner of my eye. Because I immediately thought of an assassination attempt the moment I heard the shot. I didn't see anything except just the general blur of waving, of people moving. But nothing really unusual. I did not see the president out of the corner of my eye, and I was in the process of turning back to look over my...
They needed Connally to see the president slump, then that's what he said he saw. When they later needed him not to have seen the president before he was hit, then he didn't see him. It certainly appears that Connally is a tool of the killers, doesn't it? We'll come back to him when it's time to start naming names. But until then, don't forget John Connally. If Kennedy was surrounded by enemies at the last moments of his life, at the moment of his death, they literally swarmed over his body.
Tell the children the truth. Christopher Columbus didn't discover America. Tell them the truth, yeah.
If you live in Los Angeles and you fly to Chicago and your wife is found murdered, they will go to Chicago and get you and bring you back and have a trial in the city where the murder took place. President Kennedy was murdered in Dallas. The murder investigation, including the autopsy, should, by law, have taken place in Dallas. Instead, the body was stolen by the Secret Service and loaded onto Air Force One for a flight to Washington. What happened next is difficult to believe. The evidence is overwhelming, but it may take some courage on your part to believe your eyes and ears.